Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 17th of December of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Moscow, where a very important meeting took place during the previous day. So the Russians were talking a lot about the conflict in Ukraine, and first of all they were talking about the ways how exactly the Russians are able to finish the conflict. So the Russians emphasized that since the beginning of the special military operation, they've been always talking about two ways how to finish the conflict, either with the diplomatic means or with the military means. But during this meeting, the Russians emphasized that most likely the Russians would be forced to finish the conflict on the territory of Ukraine using the military means. So this is a very important thing, that the Russians were talking about how to finish the conflict in Ukraine, and first of all the Russians were talking about how to finish the conflict on the Russia's terms. And once again the Russians chose the military way to do this. And most likely the Russians decided to probably to move using the military means, military way, because yesterday the talks between the US delegation and the delegation of Ukraine failed, and the parties haven't managed to get any decision, haven't managed to even approach to any more or less solution that can fit the Russia's requirements. Furthermore, this morning we start receiving reports that, for example, Germany to purchase military equipment worth over 50 billion euro. According to the agency, according to the Financial Times, Germany will conduct its largest military equipment purchases since 2022. Berlin took such drastic measures after the outbreak of the conflict in Ukraine. Furthermore, today we got a report that the European countries will provide additional military support to Ukraine. Germany once again will provide 11.5 billion in 2026. The United Kingdom will provide, will improve or strengthen the air defense capabilities using frozen Russian assets, and many other European countries and world countries announced about additional help to Ukraine with the purpose to fight with Russians. So we understand, and this is exactly what the Russians were talking about during this important meeting. They were saying that currently there is no way how to finish the conflict in Ukraine using diplomatic means, only the military means. So this is what the Russians were saying. And for example, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation emphasized that according to information the Russians have, most likely the conflict will continue in 2026. So this is the situation, and as we can see, the situation is a very difficult one. And as of the Ukraine, during the previous 24 hours we received lots of important updates, so let's discuss them. The sources are saying that the Odessa region, that there is a total blackout on the territory of Odessa region, and according to information we have, the local authorities announced the local and emergency situation. It's already a fifth day without electricity, without water supply, without heat in apartments. So the situation indeed is a critical one, and according to information we have, the Ukrainian authorities don't know what to do and how to resolve this issue. Furthermore, today we got a report from the Ukrainian authorities that the Odessa region is not the only region without electricity. The sources stated that there are problems with electricity and supply, energy supply on the territory of the Chernihiv region and on the territory of the Sumy region. So basically, currently there are three regions of Ukraine that suffers huge problems with this, with energy, with water, and with heat in apartments. And obviously, according to information we have, and according to statements that were made by Russians during this meeting, the situation will continue worsening. Now let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contact, along the front line. And first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction, which is currently the most important direction for both for Russians and for Ukrainians. But maybe just for Russians, I still think that Ukrainians don't understand, or the Ukrainians don't believe that the situation in this direction can become critical, and that Russians are able to get and to approach the city of Zaporozhye within the next months. But when talking about everything that is happening right now in this area, it seems that the Russians will approach the city of Zaporozhye much faster than anyone can expect. So let's discuss everything in details, and first let's talk about the city itself. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians published this video, and here we can see how Russians, as a result of reconnaissance operation, managed to discover positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the western part of the settlement, and then Russians began attacking the vehicles of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area. So this is a very important video that shows us that the Russians haven't approached the city of Zaporozhye yet, but they have already established a certain fire control or drone control over the western part of the city. Imagine yourself what kind of control the Russians will be able to establish when they approach the city limits. Now let's talk about the western Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 12 hours, 24 hours, the Russians improved their position significantly. Based on the video published by pro-Ukrainian sources, we have adjusted the map. In this video, we can see how Russians were attacking positions of the armored forces, how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation in this area. One of the attacks took place exactly at this point. The Russian soldiers were trying to hide along these trenches, but Ukrainians attacked Russians while they were doing this. Based on this video and based on the reports of different military experts who adjusted the map, the Russians, as you can see, improved their positions significantly. Furthermore, right before we started making this video, several sources stated the Russians continue their offensive operation and that the Russians managed to improve their positions even further in the northeastern direction. And most likely before the next video we will adjust the map once again, and we will add additional territories under control of the Russian forces. The president of the Russian Federation also stated that currently there are very heavy clashes for the city of Orekhov, so the Russians have already reported that the battle for the city of Orekhov started most likely several days ago. As of now, we haven't received anything that can confirm that Russians managed to approach the city limits. According to the latest updates, the Russians managed to improve their positions around the village of Novodanilovka. That was stated several days ago by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and several weeks ago the Russians reported that they managed to improve their positions around the settlement of madeThe. So of course, based on these two reports, it is logical to believe that Russians most likely began their offensive operation, but as of the 17th of December, as of the end of the 17th of December, we still haven't received anything that can confirm this. But at the same time, as we discussed, the Russians began moving in the direction of the city of Orekhov from the west, and we are going to see lots of changes on the ground in this area in coming days and weeks. As for the Zaporozhye direction, the most important updates are coming from this Zaporozhye from the eastern direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians once again managed to improve their positions on the territory of the city of Gulyai-Polye. These are the changes on the ground between the dates, and according to these changes, the Russians, by the end of the 17th of December of 2025, managed to take under control up to 60% of the city of Gulyai-Polye. The Ukrainians control just 40%. And the Russians continue advancing. According to different sources, very likely that Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from the city of Gulyai-Polye in coming days. But the most important updates as for the Zaporozhye direction are coming from its northern part. Today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes, the settlement of Gerasimovka was taken by the Russians. Furthermore, pro-Russian sources published this video where we can see how the clashes were taking place for the territory. So based on the report of the Minister of Defense, based on the report of the Group of Forces East, and based on the report and based on the video that was published by the Group of Forces East, we adjusted the map. And the settlement of Gerasimovka is the second settlement on the Ukrainian side of the river of Khaichul. So this is the situation by the end of the 14th of December, and this is the moment when the Russians began their major offensive operation with the purpose to cross the river of Khaichul and to establish a very strong foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river with one purpose: to outflank the Ukrainian defense along the R85 roads to the south in the direction of the city of Gulay-Polye. So these are the changes between the dates, and now the Russians, as you can see, have more or less strong control over the territory. Once again, this is the Zaporozhye wall. This is the Zaporozhye defense, the last, the final, and the most reliable defense layer in front of the city of Zaporozhye. This is the layer we are talking about. And as you can see, the Russians, according to information we have, managed to outflank this defense layer from the north. Russians most likely will continue offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over the settlement of Ternovata. If Russians, as a result of offensive operation, are able to establish complete control over the settlement of Ternovata, then from these positions Russians will be able to continue offensive operation in the southern direction. Basically, the Zaporozhye wall, the Zaporozhye defense layer, will collapse basically without a big resistance from the Ukrainian side. So this is the situation in this area, and of course don't forget that by the time the Russians improve their positions in the area of Ternovata and in the northern part of this Zaporozhye wall defense layer, most likely by this time the Russians would be able to improve their positions significantly around the city of Gulay-Polye, and from this very moment the Russians will begin their final and major offensive operation in the direction of the city of Orekhov and in the direction of the river of Dnipro. And it seems that probably based on these events, the conflict in Ukraine could reach its critical point, and probably could reach the point when the peaceful settlement of the conflict would be very necessary, at least for Ukrainians. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything that can confirm additional progress on the ground. We had just a lot of statements. The Russians are saying that the defense of Ukraine armed forces on the territory of Mirnograd collapsed completely. There is no longer an organized line of defense of the Ukrainian armed forces in Dmitrov, Mirnograd, but pockets of resistance remain. Furthermore, the sources reported that in coming days, Ukrainians, this city would be taken by the Russians completely, and this would be announced by the Minister of Defense. Furthermore, according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians published lots of videos where they were discovering and spotting Russian soldiers and attacking them with FPV drones. One of the attacks took place exactly at this place on the territory of the settlement of Grishna. The second attack took place a bit further to the south, to the west of the city of Pokrovsk along the railways. And the third attack took place in the area of the Zaporozhye street at this point. So we received 3 videos that confirm Russian strong control over the city of Pokrovsk and the territories around. So based on these videos, we haven't adjusted anything. We just used these videos to once again confirm Russian strong control over the territory. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Siversk. The Russians continued their offensive operation when the Ukrainians abandoned their positions from the city of Siversk. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded to the south of the settlement. This is the situation by the end of the 16th of December, and this is the 17th of December. The Russians improved their positions and managed to capture this dense network of the fortifications along TO 513 road between the settlements of Fedorovka and Kuzminovka. So this defense layer was captured by Russians. Now the Russians are able to advance further in the northwestern direction towards this huge forest that is located right in central part of the territory. Furthermore, we expect that the Russians will begin offensive operation in the direction of the villages of Nikirovka, Khromovo and Bandarne. So these 3 villages are the next task of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. They will try to maintain the line and to shorten the distances between the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, the road MO3, and the current positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this area. So the territory to the east of the city of Slaviansk, almost until the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, is the primary target for the group of forces south who are currently advancing in this area. The Russians will try to cut this territory as soon as possible, as fast as possible, with the purpose to shorten the distances to the cities of Kramatorsk, Slaviansk and Drushkovka. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Kupiansk direction. The Russians continue their offensive operation, and the Ukrainians continue their counter-offensive operation. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of videos where we can see how Russians restored initiative along the main supply lines through the river of Oskol. Here we can see another attack on Ukrainian vehicle. Furthermore, the Russians established or restored complete control with FPV drones in the northern part of the city of Kupiansk-Kozlovoy. So all these videos tell us just about one thing, that Ukrainians continue sending more and more troops on the Russian side of the river Oskol, and the most important is that Ukrainians have possibilities to bring their forces on this side of the river, and Ukrainians are trying to concentrate their forces on this bank with the purpose to counterattack Russians in the central part of the city of Kupiansk itself. So currently there are very heavy clashes. Both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians, are telling us completely different and drawing us completely different pictures. The Ukrainians are saying that the situation is stable. The Russians are telling us the same thing. But obviously, in 2-3 weeks, we will understand who was saying the truth and who was saying and who was lying. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.